It is October 14th, 1990. This is Ruth Tanner, and I'm interviewing Reiner Guth from Höchst, Germany. Let me tell you a little about what we're doing, and then tell you how I think what you've come to the United States to do will fit in with this. We've been interviewing refugees from Germany and from Europe prior to World War II, survivors of the Holocaust, and members of the United States Armed Services who fought in Europe during the Second World War to try and get essentially eyewitness testimony to the events that took place from 1933 to the end of the war. And we feel really privileged that that you're here to bring us a German perspective, I think, on these events. And I know from the biographical information that you filled out that you were not yet born when the war was over. So while you can't give us an eyewitness report, I do know that the research you've done gives you a very close to first-hand report of these events. And so what I'd like to do is start with some questions that I've prepared, but we can stray from those questions at any time. I'd like to try and establish something of a historical record, and then we'll just go from there. Okay? Would you tell me the population of Höchst today?
The population of the village we come from has about 10,000 inhabitants, and it consists of 9 smaller villages, and Höchst is the center of it.
And what was the population in, say, 1930 of
This
Höchst?
The population.
Population, yes.
Yeah.
Of Höchst.
It was in Höchst itself. It was about 2,500.
And in the total, in the little combination of villages?
There were only 2 villages where Jews lived.
Okay.
Yeah. That was Höchst, with about 205,000 inhabitants and about 120 Jews. And in Hitchbach there lived about 20 Jews with a population of about 150.
Okay, that was my question. Good. Okay, thank you. That was the essence of what I wanted. So from Höchst proper, 2,500 residents, of whom 120 approximately were Jews. Okay. Tell me about the purpose, the general interests, really, of your historical club. I'd like to know about it, what it wants to do.
Our historical club was founded 6 years ago, and we had the idea that there is a necessity to research on history, on the latest history, the latter history, because a lot of eyewitnesses died, and we wanted to have the last ones to be interviewed.
Yes, I understand.
Yeah.
So you're going backwards in time, starting from the most recent events.
Yeah.
Backwards.
Backwards. Yeah.
Backwards. Okay.
That's right.
How many people are in the? How many members are there of the historical club?
More than 200 members are in our club, but people who work effectively at about 5 or 6, not more.
I see.
They are passive members.
Okay.
They support us.
This is maybe a more philosophical question. How did it come about that members of the historical club, all of them non-Jews today, became interested in researching the history of the small Jewish community of Höchst and the surrounding area? Or, I know from your more recent book, the slave laborers who came to Höchst during the war. How did it come about that those subjects interested you?
I think as far as our former citizens of Jewish religion are concerned, it was Mr. Hofferbert, one of our members of the historical club. He was interested in each of the faiths of these people from the very beginning on, and he asked me someday if I could support him because I belong to the local authorities. I'm a representative in the local parliament, and therefore I had got some possibilities to support him, because before he didn't get any help. That was the beginning. And after that, we had a documentation. We have always a documentation where we show an exhibition to public, and we write a book on it. That is always combined with each other. The next step was that we dealt with the refugees and the displaced persons. And the last thing we did was on the history of these young people who were replaced from their homes during the war, beginning in 1941 to 1945. Upmost Polish people and Russian people, young people, who were forced to work in the war industry in our area.
Who were brought from their homes.
They were brought from their homes. They were not asked. They were brought there. They worked in the industry, war industry, and with farmers.
Right. The term that is used in the United States for that is slave laborers.
Slave labor. We don't use that word in Germany.
I know. It's not a very nice word.
Yeah.
I know. Okay. Tell me something about yourself. I know that you're a teacher. Do you teach this history in your school? Do you teach this kind of subject in your school?
Yeah, we teach that. That is compulsory in our curriculum. But we can't do it that way we wrote that book. We haven't got people who can speak out from their own experiences. And it is very difficult to teach the children about these happenings, about these happenings in the years of the war and before.
But it is part of what?
It is compulsory part of the curriculum. Yeah.
Okay. Will you tell me something about Höchst itself, the village, in the 1930s? I'd like to know, to have it described, I'd like to know how people lived, what their occupations were, what economic conditions were like, and how you think, based on your research, most people responded to the rising influence of the Nazi Party.
Our village was a very poor one concerning the social conditions, and it still nearly is. There was only one factory nearby where a lot of people worked, but most of the people worked in agriculture, in farms, and they had very small land. So we can say they were very poor ones. And could you interrupt?
Okay.
Yeah.
No, sure. Well, you got most of it.
Yeah.
I was interested in how you think most people responded to the rising influence of the National Socialist Party.
I myself was not born at that time, but we spoke to people. The German people are very, they don't want to tell that. Even when they were politically on the other side, when they were socialists or communists. I don't know the psychological reason. When we asked in interviews some elderly people about that time, how they felt, how they lived, they always asked us if we wanted to publish that, because they are still very anxious. They are afraid of, but they can't say of what they're really afraid of.
Would they answer your question if you said?
To answer my question?
No. Would they answer it if you said you wouldn't publish it?
Yes. We said we publish it, but your names won't be mentioned.
And did they answer you?
Then they did.
And what did they say?
Some, not all.
What did they say? Those that answered.
They said we lived together with the Jews, and there was the only difference that they had a Sabbath, for instance, and we went to church on Sundays. Otherwise, we lived on good terms. Yeah, we accepted each other, and the influence of the Nazis that can't be explained by them. Nobody told us that the reasons why he took part in these actions. These people we are not willing to be interviewed. It was only the passive population who behaved passively, who was willing to answer our questions.
So those who really were non-participants
Yes, that's right.
would answer.
That's right. Yeah.
I see. Did the Jewish population of Höchst live in much the same way as their non-Jewish neighbors? Were they also poor, mainly agricultural?
Especially our Jews were very poor people.
Were poor.
They're very poor people. There was no difference between the non-Jewish population and the Jewish one.
Were they also working on farmland?
Some of them did, but most of them had small shops.
Mm-hmm.
And in addition to that, they worked something extra because they couldn't afford life with only the shops. And
So, from what you're saying, the Jewish and the non-Jewish
yeah, population.
residents of Höchst really lived in much the same way. Their
Yeah.
lives were very similar, with the exception of the difference in their religions.
Yes, it was the only one.
From what you've learned of that time, were the Jewish residents, we use the term here, good neighbors? Did they interact with their non-Jewish neighbors? Were they considered to be part of the community? Did they take part in things that were of interest to the non-Jewish residents of Höchst?
There are some differences. What the cultural life and the social life, as far as this is concerned, they took part in it, in choirs, and they were engaged in the local authorities, parliament, yeah, but not so in the sports.
I understand. Athletics, yeah.
Athletics and so on, yeah. And there was no separation. The only separation was the religious life at the weekend. Yeah.
Okay.
But everybody knew that at this time they couldn't go together with the Christians to festivals or
I know you weren't born at this time, but
Yeah.
if you know of an example, how did the Nazi rule, the Nazi government first affect your family or people, that were perhaps close to you? And can you give some examples?
I myself lucky because my father was a socialist and they had quarrels very early with the local Nazis, yeah. And so far they were never affected with the prejudices against the Jews. But some acquainted people from me, they were affected by it because the propaganda was so overwhelming. And it was a mass propaganda that they didn't reflect on the problems. They did what they expected them, how they should react.
Did your father have a problem as a socialist, since he would have been considered an opponent of Nazism?
Yes, there was an incident. Hitler came to government on the 13th of January 1933, and in our village, in this evening, there was a meeting of the Nazi Party and of the Social Party in two different pubs. And at 10 o'clock, it was finished, and these different groups meet each other in the marketplace, and two people were shot. One was the leader, the chairman of the Social Democrats. Another one was an SR man, but he was shot from behind. And eight of these people were punished, or sentenced to prison between 6 years and 10 years. Yeah.
The people who were sentenced were the socialists?
Only the socialists. And the witnesses were young people at the age of 12. They witnessed that. And there was a process after the war, and the leader of the regional Nazis, he was a Höchsterian, Mr. Fleckenstein, he confessed at court that he shot his comrade from behind. It was an accident. But these people had to
Serve
go
time.
to prison, yeah.
Yes.
And their families were persecuted. Yeah.
What changes took place as a result, and I'm talking about the non-Jews now of Höchst, from the Nazi control of really the Germany?
Sorry, could you repeat?
I'm sorry. What changes came about that were obvious in Höchst for everybody as a result of Nazi control of the government?
In 33.
Yes, in 33.
Yeah, what changed in my village? First, the mayor was changed. Before, there was a socialist. He was chosen by the population.
Elected.
Or he was elected by the population, yeah. And when the Nazis came to government, they made a law that the results of the latest Reichstags election had to be transformed on the local basis too. You see what I mean? Yeah.
Yes.
And therefore, any village they had the majority. They had a majority, and so only 5 representatives, 4 of them belonged to the Nazi party, and 1 was without belonging to any party. Yeah, they ruled there. And a very close friend to this new mayor, he was the Ortsgruppenleiter. He was the leader of the Nazi group, and he was the leader of the political decisions, not a mayor. This leader of the party was that.
So with a very abrupt and complete change in Höchst's political system, then, with the change in the mayor and others in the, I guess we would call it a council.
The council, local town council. Yeah.
What then, as a result of that, what happened to the Jewish population of Höchst? What were the consequences for them?
In the very beginning, there was only the propaganda that was made throughout the country. And that meant nothing to the Jews in the very beginning, because most of them believed, they had a very firm belief that nothing could happen to them. I don't know why they thought so. And a very fine example is our Jewish teacher, the late Honorable Rabbi Kahn. He believed that nothing could happen to him till 1939, because these elder people, they were very traditional and conservative Germans. In the first case, they were Germans and not Jewish. And insofar, there was, in the beginning, there was no problem for them. But in 1934, because of several amendments and laws, that changed. Because they get, just a minute, certain restrictions.
The Nuremberg laws.
Certain restrictions, and the propaganda arose in that time, yeah.
Okay, I want to come back. Maybe we'll just go to that and come back. So by the time of November 10th, 1938, what we call Kristallnacht, then, what happened in Höchst then?
My mother told me, she was there, my father was not present, he was a soldier at that time, that at that night it was a robbery. In the first case it was a robbery, it was not a political action. And to be honest, as far as I know it, people of all political belief, not all people, a few of them, took part in that robbery. That is not understandable for me. Okay, it was not, they were not rich people, but the Jews were their neighbors. and they took away whatever they could get
And from their homes?
from their homes. And that is the truth told by a lot of people from all sides. And it weren't alone, not the Nazis alone. There were socialists, communists, any sort of people.
Regardless of political color.
Yeah. You know that it was planned. It was planned by the authorities of the Nazi Party, and it should be shown as a spontaneous action. But it was not a spontaneous action. They came from Darmstadt, the SR men, but the local party members took part in these actions. They went to the synagogue and they destroyed and demolished the interior. They didn't set it on fire because the mayor forbade that to them because the houses nearby, they were so close to the synagogue. And they went to the teacher Khan, who was so respectable person in our community, and they throw his furniture out of the windows, yeah, and did any sort of barbarism and brutalism. A lot of these neighbors had to flee. They were hit by, I don't know if these people who take in that direct actions where people were injured, if they were Höxterians or if they were men of the SR who came from Darmstadt, I don't know that, because nobody could tell me exactly that.
So, come back in a second.
Yes.
Okay, we're going to continue talking about the events of Kristallnacht in Höchst, November 10th, 1938. I'm sorry, go ahead. The people who, you said that many people left their homes and went to hide?
They went into forest.
They went to the forest.
They went to their relatives in the bigger towns where they thought to be protected. Yeah, some of them came some days later back. That was possible, but they had to be afraid of being kept. Yeah, so most of them left. Yeah.
Been captured. Yes. Let me go back in time a little bit, because in a way we were jumping ahead to the story. From 1933 on, as I understand it from talking with Germans, whether they came from Höchst or not, who left Germany, people began to try, Jewish people began to try and leave. I know in your letter that you wrote to me, you mentioned that 75 of Höchst's Jewish citizens left the country. What made it possible for them to leave, from your point of view?
Oh, in the very beginning of the anti-Semitic policy of the so-called German Reich, they wanted the people to leave the country. Insofar, there were no restrictions apart from the fact that they took the money away from them.
They left,
Yeah.
left their money behind.
Yes, most of their money. Otherwise, they could go. But I spoke about these people who were who lived for a very long time and had certain political views, like this teacher. These people, they didn't believe that, and they wanted to stay and to remain their mother villages. And the elderly people who were not able to go on such a long journey, and some people who were ill. That was the remaining part of the Jewish population who stayed here.
Yes. In Nashville, we've heard from many of the people who came to Nashville, came here because of the May, or as you say it, the My family.
Yeah.
What do you know about the role of the My family, Mortimer and his father Jacob, in making it possible for Höchst Jewish residents, some of them or others, to come to the United States?
The May people were very fine people. They helped the Jewish and the Christian population in my village before these incidents, and they helped when they had to escape from their country here in Nashville, the May family. They gave them the money which was necessary for getting the affidavits, I think.
Yes,
that
the
is the name.
documents, yes.
Yeah. They helped them to get jobs, to get flats, apartments, and so on. And back to their benefits they did on the whole population. In my village, there was Moses Mai, Mr. Moses Mai, who used to live in Frankfurt, but he was related to the Mai Jews in Höchst. And every year he gave money to the butchers on Christmas so that the poor people could get meat without paying any money. That was regularly done by Mr. May. And so he was a benefactor, because most of our houses had no bathrooms. He gave 30,000 golden Reichsmark for erecting a bathhouse in the school, Höchst. Yeah, mostly for the Christian population, because the Jews had a ritual bath.
That's very interesting. Thank you. For the people who left Höchst, who left as refugees, the Jews who left, what happened to the homes and the other property that they left behind, their stores or farmland, whatever?
In the beginning of the persecution, it was so that the houses and the land and the properties were sold regularly. That means under regular terms. Is that right?
Just say it to me again.
They were sold and they received the money that was an equivalent for that. That is what I wanted to say in the beginning. Yeah. There was a trust, and Mr. Kahn, our Jewish teacher, he was the chairman of that. He worked together with the bank. Yeah. That means later when the people had to leave their country in a hurry, yeah, they gave Mr. Kahn the permission to sell their houses. Yeah. And the prices they were, just a minute, the prices they get for the houses from 1936 or 1937 on, they were lower than before. And in the end, in 1938, after the Reichskristallnacht, it was just nothing. And you know, after the war, there was an organization called the IRSO, Jewish Restitution Successor Organization. Yeah, and they took care for getting an equivalent. That means that these people, these Christian German people, who bought the houses and the land of the Jewish population for half the price or a third of the price, they had to pay after the war the equivalent for that.
And they paid it to WIZO, and WIZO in turn saw that the former residents.
Yeah, but in our village, I know 8 cases that the Jewish population, the living Jewish population, that they said, no, we don't want any money from you.
Were there, let me switch the subject a little bit. I know this is hard to talk about, but were there any efforts that you're aware of by the non-Jewish population of Höchst to protect or hide or in any way assist the Jewish residents while they were there?
Yes. There are some, only a few examples when Höchsterian Christians helped Jewish people, providing them food. There was no law that Jews couldn't buy any food. It was restricted, you know, during the war the food was restricted, and the Jews get their cards and the Christians get their cards. And the cards of the Jews were reduced. They were reduced because they were citizens of minor importance. And I know some examples when people, German people, gave food to them during the night because they were afraid of being persecuted by the Nazis.
They brought
And
food.
it was a very dangerous offense to do that. An offense not of the law, but it was persecuted by the party. Yeah. And so far we have got some examples for that, or even that they were hidden by some people, but there were only a few who did this. Most of the population behaved passively because they were afraid of these people. Not of the Jewish people, but of the party. They
were afraid of being punished.
Yeah, of being punished. Yeah.
Yes.
And I know one example I can tell you, if you like. There was a small shop run by a Christian. They sold vegetables. And this lady was Mrs. Schnellbacher. And two elderly Jewish women, they were unmarried, and they were they hadn't the best health. They went to that shop in 1942, short before the closing time. And I went in and I asked for some vegetables, and Mrs. Schnellbacher went into the kitchen and wrapped a cauliflower, very small cauliflower, into a newspaper. And meanwhile, a wife of a Höchsterian Nazi came into the shop and saw when Mrs. Schnellbacher gave this very small cauliflower to that Jewish woman. She said nothing in the first, but the next day, the following day, this Mrs. Schnellbacher was arrested, and it took 6 weeks to get her free. And to get her free, that was only possible because she knows some influential people. That was the situation like when they helped these people, and they were the very poor Jewish people.
I know that in your documentation that you've done, you know what happened to the people who were not able to leave Germany.
Yeah.
Can you give some examples? Right, and you've said, you've already said very clearly that these are the poor, the elderly.
We had 2 transports in 1942 and 1943. In 1943, all Jews were away. These transports consist of, at first, 15 people and then 14 people. The poor,
taken by truck?
They were taken by truck, and they presumably knew where they did come to. Because we got some information that one of the SR men in Höchsteria, he told one Jewish lady, Mrs. Kramer, because she asked for something she had left at home when she was on at the lorry. He said, "It is not necessary, Mrs. Kramer, to go back. Where you come, you won't need anything." And this lady had 3 children, and they all died in the Auschwitz camp. In Poland. The elderly people, they came first to Theresienstadt. You know that?
Yes, in Czechoslovakia.
That was it was shown to the public as if they got new flats and everything would be all right there, but they didn't believe that. But on the other hand, I think that's a psychological problem. They didn't say to their children or to their relatives where they would come to. They didn't believe it, but they knew it. You understand?
Yes, yes, I do.
Yeah.
I want to ask you a hard question, but
Mm.
beyond the members of your historical club, how would you say that other people, the other people in Höchst today, feel about the events during the Nazi time for Jews and all the others who were considered undesirable, the gypsies, the homosexuals, the political opponents? I'm including all of those people, I guess.
How the people reacted when we published the book.
Yes.
That is what you mean, or when we published the book on the...
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I would say there was, in the beginning, there was no reaction. There was no reaction. It was that if the book hasn't been written, it was strange. Nobody said you shouldn't write that book. But there was nobody who said it is all right that you have written
Or I'm
it.
glad that you wrote it.
Yeah. And that we get some money by the local authorities, that was not a reason that they did it because they wanted to support us. It was our influence on the political parties, and they didn't want, sorry, I haven't got the right word now, but they didn't want that the impression that the newspapers wrote about that they were not willing to support that. Yes, it was not the conviction.
Yes, I understand.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
You mentioned that in your letter that
Yeah.
you sold 1,000 copies of this book.
Oh, more than
More
1,000.
than
Yeah.
Who has bought them? I mean, who buys these books?
First, that was the local authorities, because any of our survivors in America and all over the world, they get one copy.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the exhibition we had a lot of people outside our village. They bought it, not so the Höchsterian population. I don't know why. Perhaps some of them were interested, but there was not a great support of the population.
Let's talk about the book for a minute. The book covers the history that we've just been talking about.
Not only that part, we tried to give some general ideas on the Jewish population, on their history and social history and religious education, because our aim was that the people should know and should understand more. Yeah. So far we have a general introduction.
Do you feel, and maybe you've answered this, do you feel that some or even many Germans, and I don't necessarily mean people from Höchst, feel responsibility for this time or remorse, as you clearly feel, for the Nazi period?
It is very hard to say. There's a difference between what people say and what people feel. And the people who feel guilty, they don't tell that. And the younger people, they don't feel responsibility for that. They don't feel being guilty for that. Mm-hmm. Might be some of them, they feel responsible because their father and grandfathers did such brutal things, but there is no personal feeling of being guilty. I experienced this at school, as a teacher at school. Yeah? And we must be careful as teachers. If we bring always the same facts, yeah, any school year, it might happen that our aims won't fulfilled. That is what I realized. I have been a teacher for nearly 20 years.
And tell me a little more about that. I'm not sure I understand you completely, okay?
Mm.
That by telling children
The way,
about this bad time,
yeah,
that it may not have the influence or the result you would like?
yeah.
Why?
Our lessons are not vivid, is not a vivid documentation of what happened. It is very abstract to these young people. And the last 10 years, we had a lot of series on Jewish persecution on television. A lot of books were produced because it wasn't done just after the war. Yeah. And insofar, I wanted to say that if you influence young people with so many documents, the effect on them might be vice versa, because they reject it. What do I have in common with that? Is that why I am responsible for that? Yeah, that is what I wanted to express with that.
I understand.
Yeah.
That leads me to a question, another
Yeah.
question that I have that's also a hard question. We read in the United States about a rising neo-Nazism in Germany. Do you feel that that's a movement that is gaining political support?
Nazis, what do you mean by that?
Well, a new Nazism, a new interest in Nazism.
I wouldn't say that's a movement, a political movement. I think in any sort of political system or in any country, you will have people on the right and on the left. That is a social problem in the first case. Yeah? Most of them are not in higher positions. They are dropouts or they are without any jobs, as far as I can, as I saw it. And insofar, I wouldn't say that's a political movement. That is a very small percentage of the population, and we must live with that, with these problems.
I have read that while now we say former West Germany
Yeah.
really worked hard over the last 50 years to come to terms with the Holocaust. They've paid reparations to refugees and survivors, so on. East Germany has done very little, as far as I understand. What do you think a unified...
Even against the local authorities, there are some remarks, when they read that, they won't pay anything. That is so. No, for instance, Lech Kowalski from Warsaw, I know him. I met him in March, Dr. Kowalski.
You ready, Mark?
Yes.
Okay. We'll come to it in a minute. I'm going to ask you about it in a minute. Let me ask you two more other questions. I want to finish the question I started. I had started saying in the previous tape that while West Germany, former West Germany, has done a great deal to respond to refugees and survivors of the Holocaust, East Germany, former East Germany, has done so far very little. What do you think now that a unified Germany can do toward promoting a wider understanding of this period in German history?
The people in the eastern part of our country, they lived under dictatorship, but it can't be compared with the Nazi regime. That is what I first wanted to say. But their education concerning the history during the Nazi regime is not a very good one. And so far, I think we have to teach at least the younger generation what happened in those days. But I don't know a method how to do that, you know. But I think it's necessary because I heard that there is a group, not a small group, of young people in that eastern part of Germany who behave like fascists sometimes. Yeah, that is a more severe problem than in West Germany, to speak in those terms. Yeah. I don't know a method how to
I don't know either,
how
so.
to resolve that problem here. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you one more question.
Just
Okay.
they are even against Polish people. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
I wanted to ask you about the memorial that is on the in the place in the place where the synagogue used to stand after it was demolished. And I know there's a memorial there with a plaque on it to the Jewish community. Yes, I'm not sure I have it right, so I'm sort of stumbling over the words. But there's a memorial near where the synagogue used to be.
Near where the synagogue used to be.
And a plaque on the memorial to the Jewish community of Höchst. And my question really was, what other things can be done in Höchst alone to help its citizens understand what happened in those years? Plaques on houses, for example, or educational programs? I'm just making general suggestions.
I think the best thing to do is what we are doing. Yeah, we come together with the survivors of the Holocaust. We take any opportunity to meet each other and to speak each other. And we had a public meeting 2 years ago where more than 300 of the population took part in. And our Jews, I say our Jews, excuse me for using that way, they went to the schools and the children listened to them. Not so to us teachers, because we haven't experienced that.
Let me just make sure that we clarify that in 2 years ago
we had a meeting.
You brought the Jews many of the Jews who lived in Höchst. Why don't you explain that so that we will know what we have. Okay. Tell us what happened 2 years ago.
2 years ago, our historical club asked the local authorities that they should give us some money for inviting the survivors all over the world as far as they could go on such a very long journey to come to Höchst. And 12 of them did so, and we met at the 50th anniversary of the so-called Reichskristallnacht for 8 days there. And I think this meeting was an opportunity that more than 300 Höchsterians took part in a panel discussion, and later on they had the opportunity to ask questions to the survivors. I remember one incident, a man of 50, he didn't know that his father did take part in the action. He didn't know, and he had a separate talk with Mrs. Frank Herzfeld, who is from Nashville.
He didn't know that his own father was a Nazi.
No, he didn't know. And what he did, not only his membership, that is not so interesting, what he really did. Yeah, she told him. That was not for the public. She told him privately.
That's a good answer. I'd like to know about your new book. You have the Höchst Historical Club has just published a new book on the young people who were brought to the town between 1942 and 1944 to work in war industry. And maybe you could tell us a little bit about what the book is about. Yeah.
The book is a documentation on the foreign slave workers who were forced to leave their countries to work for 4 or 5 years in Germany, in the war industry and in the gum industry and with the farmers together. Yeah? Imagine that in such a small village like ours was, and a neighbor village, there were 1,800 young people from the age between 18 and 28. Most of them came from the eastern countries, Ukrainians, Polish people, and a lot of girls, young girls from the High Crim. And any sort of nations, but less of the Western countries. And there were special laws and special conditions under which, for instance, the Polish and the Ukrainian people had to work. They had to work 12 hours a day, whereas the Italians had to work 8 hours. They get less food, for instance. They had no allowances to go to a cinema or to go outside the camps. Yeah? They even forbade them to have their services. That is all printed in that book. Yeah? Even the laws they make specifically for that group or for those groups.
We've covered a lot of ground, and I know some of it's a lot of information, and I know some of it has been hard for you to talk about. Is there anything that I haven't asked you that you would like to say?
There's a lot, but I think it's not possible to tell that all in an interview like that. I'm very pleased that the May family living in Nashville here gave our Jewish people the possibility to live in a free country. And I think that is very important, that such people, that those people were there and helped. And we are very thankful for that. And we are even very thankful that we can be here in New York and in Nashville. And we are thankful that the citizens of our town or our village, that they are so open-minded to us. Therefore, I want to say thank you.
I would like to say thank you to you for helping us understand how some Germans see this period in a way that makes us feel good. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Last.
Yeah.
Long A.
All right.
Actually, that one speaks for itself, doesn't it? The synagogue was destroyed in the war, or it wasn't destroyed on Kristallnacht.
It was destroyed in the Reichskristallnacht,
Oh, it was.
but they didn't set it on fire because it was too dangerous for the other buildings.
But it doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, it was used for in the war for the Red Cross, and after the war in 1946 they broke it down.
I see. You ready, Mark?
Mhm.
Switch? Okay. Why don't you put it up on the chair, and then I'll hand you another one. Or put it down. Which? Here we go. Just want to say do you need him to say who it was? What do you think, Mark?
Well, I can either say who it is, or I can just shoot the title and then come up on it.
Do you want to say who it is?
This is the Jewish teacher, Mr. Hermann Kahn. He is the honored citizen of our village. He was a Jewish teacher for more than 50 years.
The one you spoke about. Sunday.
Yeah. This is the second wife of Mr. Kahn. The first wife died and his youngest son, and his daughter, Bercha. She's the only who is alive. And, sorry, and this young man too. This boy
Alive
too,
today.
yeah. He lives in Florida. Yeah. This is the whole family, Khan. They had a house nearby the synagogue. And he was the director of the choir.
In the synagogue or for the town?
In this, to the town, yeah.
Town.
Where the, this is his and his wife's graves in Passaic in New Jersey. We went there some days ago.
Is that enough for you, Mark?
Yeah, I got it.
You got it, okay.
That is the choir called Liederkranz.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of Höchsterians were
Not
members.
necessarily Jews, right?
Jews and Christians,
Jews and Christians.
yeah.
Got it?
They
Mark?
were all citizens, bourgeoisie. What do you say here?
Yeah. Bourgeoisie? We
Yeah.
said that, yes. This will have to hold a little longer, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll spend about 5 seconds
It is
on
the
each
same.
picture.
Okay, he'll take it anyway. This is the choir. Oops.
Let me go and get a shot. Each.
He'll take each one.
This is always the teacher Khan here. He played an important role in the community, not only in the Jewish community, even in the with the local
Yes.
authorities. Yeah,
But
he
is
was
this-
an authority.
is this the choir at different times, or everybody's in the same choir?
They went on excursions every year, and they took photos.
I see.
Yeah.
This also is complicated. Can you pull that one off?
This shows the correspondence of our secretary, who is responsible for the contacts with the Jewish families when he started the contacts about 12 years ago.
I see.
And as there was no support from our local authorities because they said you can't get any addresses because of protecting the dates of these people, he got help by two newspapers. It was the Aufbau in New York and the Israel News in Jerusalem. It is the same. That is the correspondence of our secretary with the town council. The town councillors in Frankfurt am Main. One of our Jewish person died, and he was buried on the cemetery, on the Jewish cemetery, but there was no tombstone erected. And 5 years ago, our secretary asked the local authorities, and they managed that a stone in the graveyard was erected. Das ist auch diese Korrespondenz.
Same thing, okay.
Yeah. Oh, that's quite interesting. That is a contact of a Höchst Christian citizen with Mr. Hermann Kahn, the Jewish teacher. The Jewish teacher was so insulted that he didn't want, understandably, to have any contact with Höchst, and so his children. But as he was a very upright and honest man, he gave the address of his children to the letter writer, you see? But he wrote that he himself didn't want to have any further contacts. What was understandable.
What did this gentleman from Höchst, want from him?
The addresses of the teacher's children.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Because they had a meeting of the class members of the school class members, you see.
And they wanted to invite the children.
Yeah, and he wrote. It was in my mind that I didn't want to have any contact with any of the Germans because a lot of them are anti-Semitic and people, and but apart from that, I will fulfill my duty and give you the addresses of my children. Yeah, these pictures show this gentleman at the age of 70 years, rabbi in New York. You see, I think at that time he couldn't laugh. And he was a very funny man, a humorous man before what I heard.
Did you get it, Mark?
I got
Sorry.
3 of them.
Sorry, that was together with his second wife in New York.
Yes, he looks very solemn.
Yeah.
Very solemn.
Alright. Okay.
This is a letter from Mr. Karl Herzfeld from Herzliya in Israel when he wrote to Mr. Hofferbett giving him information because Mr. Hofferbett researched all the fates of any of our Jewish citizens. Yeah, it was a lot to do.
Yes.
I think he has got 13 orders, you call that orders, with files.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Yeah, with correspondence. Can I put it away? Yeah.
This is the cemetery you're talking
That is the cemetery. Do you think it's necessary to show
This
it?
is the one in Frankfurt.
In Frankfurt,
Yes,
yeah,
yes,
with
yes,
Clara
sure.
Herzfeld.
These are the stones that were put up at his request, at Mr. Hoferbert's request, right?
At Mr. Hofferbett's request, the local authorities fulfilled his wish.
You could maybe tilt it towards you a
Yeah.
little bit. There we go.
And you should know that this is for the relatives. It's very important,
Yes.
not for Mr. Hofferbett or.
No, of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
What do you call the Torah roll? Torah roll? Or
Torah?
Torah roll?
Torah?
Torah roll.
Mm-hmm.
And but later, when the Nazis might, and synagogues outside Höchst were destroyed, they brought some Torah rolls to that synagogue.
I see.
And I think that teacher Kahn took, I don't know exactly if it was so, took some of the rolls with him, yeah, and brought them to America, and some of them even went to Paraguay. Yeah, and one of the German, of the Höchsterian Torah roll is buried on a graveyard in Asunción in Paraguay.
Asunción.
Yeah.
Each of our synagogues here in Nashville has a Torah scroll
Yeah,
from Eastern Europe.
in Eastern Europe, yeah.
Well, one is from Czechoslovakia. I
Oh.
don't know. I don't know where the one in the temple is from, but brought from synagogues like this.
You know, if there is a list where they try to fill in where all the roads. This shofar, you know, that is it
Yes.
belonged to the
Center.
Höchst community, yeah.
Mhm.
And this is now in the synagogue of Asunción
Ascension,
in Paraguay.
Interesting.
Some people
Interesting.
took it away with them. That is, this photo shows the Torah rolls, the
Burial,
moment of the
yeah.
burial,
Yeah.
and there's a translation that they feel sad for the Torah rolls which were burned, and are buried here at this place in January 1967 or the 25th Tevet, 5027.
Yes.
And it's remarked that some of them are from Höchst.
This is a complicated one.
It was at the 50th anniversary of the Reichskristallnacht. There was an official act in our town where even some representatives of the Jewish community.
This is what you were telling me, that when the 12 people came?
It was in 1808, yes, the exhibition. But we had an exhibition before when we published the book, you see.
I see, okay.
Yeah, but this was in 1988. This gentleman is the chairman of all the Jewish communities in Hesse. Moritz Neumann is his name, for instance. That's the mayor of our village. And this shows some of the documents, even this document I have got in my hand. Okay.
Did you get it?
No.
To call it when the memorial is opened, is it opened or uncovered?
Dedicated?
Uncovered. You
Yeah,
see what I do?
Yeah, uncovered.
Uncovered, yeah. This is a newspaper article where a Nashville citizen is quoted. That is Mrs. Elsa Frank born Herzfeld. She is a very open-minded lady, and she always told us, and she was the first who came back to Höchst after the war. Lasst eure Stimmen hören, bevor sie vor Angst erstickt. That is hard to translate, but it means that you should say what you think. And you shouldn't being afraid of the consequences. Yeah, so long as you can tell your opinion, you should do that. And she helped us a lot. This very humorous lady. And the photos show. What did we say? The opening or the
uncovering?
The uncovering of the memorial, which shows a relief, and we have written down that the synagogue stood at this place, and we expect that all the brutal and horrible things should never happen again.
Okay.
Yeah, the Protestant and the Roman
Catholic.
reference, they took part in that act here. That is another quotation of Mrs. Frank
Oh, I see.
Herzfeld.
There's Elsa here.
She said, "We Jews were Germans in the best sense of the word." And she is together with our mayor here in Höchst.
We Jews
earlier.
We Jews
We
were,
Jews.
Were Germans in the best
Yeah.
sense of the word.
Yes.
That's very nice.
That is the memorial in front of the town house, the town hall. with the relief.
That commemorates the synagogue.
That is near to where the former synagogue used
Yes.
to be. It's a very central place now. Next. Everybody meets that memorial. These are some pictures. We went on excursions with our guests in 1988.
Ah,
Yeah, in the surroundings.
Need it tilted this way.
Yeah,
so these are the 12 former Jewish residents
Yes.
of Hoaxton who
Yes,
came
that is
back,
a-
and you're
that is all right.
traveling with them.
Yeah.
I see.
yes. There's some people from Paraguay and Argentina and Brasilia. One lady is from England, is from England, and some people from Jerusalem. From all over the world. And they spoke in their accent, in their Exterior accent. We were away for more than 50 years.
Yes. That's wonderful.
And that was very impressive for the children at school, yeah? When they heard them speaking a dialect, yeah, speaking in accent,
Yes.
they couldn't believe that. Usual contacts. There is we call this man the Landrat. He is responsible for a whole district. I don't know if you have such an institution in America. And some of our guests here.
Okay, Mark?
It is not ordered chronologically, like I told him. After our first exhibition, there came a lot of guests from America and Israel to Höchst. It was a very fine success for us. Sometimes twice a month, guests came. Yeah, they heard about this and they got the publication, and then they decided to come back to Höchst. For instance, these
This
people, and even the predecessors of the ancestors, sorry, the children of them, their grandchildren, yeah.
Wonderful.
Mr. Hoffenberg was always busy
Yes.
in showing
I see.
the documentation. but he was very proud of this. For instance, this gentleman came from Jerusalem, Manfred Kahn. His relatives used to live in Höchst, but he himself was in Großumstadt. It is a town nearby. And some other people.
Okay.
But that doesn't fit now.
Okay.
Some of the Mays were very wealthy people in Frankfurt. These people, I told you that Moses Kahn supported our community, not only the
Moses May.
Jewish people, Moses May, sorry. And he had a department store in Frankfurt, but he was the only May who was rich. And this shows the graves of some of his relatives. And this is the factory.
That's May Hosiery in Nashville.
Yeah, in Nashville. That is the May. What did you say? The May?
It's called May Hosiery.
Hosiery.
Hosiery Mill. May Hosiery Mill.
I see. Yeah, in Nashville. Yeah. This is the benefactor, Moses May.
What became of him?
He went to Nashville too. Yeah, Moses May. Yeah.
Doesn't look like Jack or Leo.
On the left hand you see this gentleman with his only daughter, Margaret Moore.
Tilt it this way a little bit.
About straighten it, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, by the way, did I tell you that we had since 1989, yeah, we have got a Jewish graveyard in Höchst. Before, all the corpses had to be buried in Mittelstadt, that is a village about 10 miles away.
Mm-hmm.
And as the community grew up, it was necessary to have an own graveyard.
Mm-hmm.
It was not easy for the Jewish authorities to get the permission for that. This is a very long story. But they were successful in the end, and the stone here on the graveyard of Höchst shows Lösemann Mai's grave. He was the father of Moses Mai.
Is it his actual grave or it's just a stone?
That is still so.
The person is buried there.
The person is buried there in Höchst.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And Mr. Hoferberg takes care of this.
Die Grabstätte.
The gravestone of Moses Mai, Nashville, Tennessee. There's the translation of the Hebrew.
Yes.
These two letters are from December 1919, and they are addressed to the chairmen of the Israeli community, and they show that Mr. Moses Mai sent money for the poor people of Höchst. Both. It was there we have passports, and you know there was a law that they had to be signed for the Jews especially by printing a chain onto it, and as far as Jewish people hadn't got a first name which was derived from Hebrew, they had to take on a Jewish name, either Israel for the man and for the women, Sarah.
Okay.
And there is the permission that they can go away
Leave.
printed
Yes.
in the passport. This family lives
It's Hetty.
here in Nashville. That is Hedy Reinheimer's parents, Mr. Israel Reinheimer and his wife, and he died a couple of years ago. And the lady lives together with the daughter and her son-in-law. We visited her too. If she knew that I show that to you, give me a good hiding. Yeah. That is the passport of a Nashville citizen, the latest Nashville citizen, Else Herzfeld. And you see the entries of the authorities of Germany when she left the country in 1937. Dringlichkeitsbescheinigung, that means it's urgent. And they had to pay for that, yeah, for getting the permission. And all the financial things has to be entered in that passport, yeah, that she has paid for this and that.
Yes.
And how many money she was allowed to take with her and so on. All in the passport.
Okay.
This is the back of the treasury.
Our secretary has solved all the fate of the killed people, apart from 3 persons where he doesn't know where they came to. And we worked very closely together with the so-called Sonderstandesamt. They are responsible for the whole Federal Republic of Germany, where the Jews came to. And they performed the documents, yeah? And we could help them. And a very fine lady, and she helped us. There we got the documents. Yeah.
This is from Theresienstadt.
That is Auszug aus dem Todesregister. You have very strange names in German language. It means an extract of the register of the dead people, of the dead people.